Welcome to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid. A set of conversations about our government, our politics, and the kind of country we aspire to be. And now, here's your host, Edwin Eisendrath, on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Well, sort of. It's sort of Edwin. It's Edwin. It's faux Edwin. I'm about as much Edwin as, like, the tofurkey is. I'm not Edwin. It's Turi Ryder on Thanksgiving weekend because you know what? Everybody deserves a holiday weekend once in a while, right? So here I am for Edwin Eisendrath, and it is a pleasure and an honor to be holding down the fort for Edwin on this Thanksgiving Day. Very snowy weekend in Chicago. Just kind of, it's like, you know when you put powdered sugar on your cake and you just kind of sprinkle it? And then you go, oh, this is fun. And then you put a little more, and then you go, wee, and you kind of dump the powdered sugar all over the cake. That's what's happening outside right now as I sit inside the beautiful WCPT 820 AM studios. And there is so much to talk about. We have really interesting folks coming on. You should know that you can be part of the show at 773-763-WCPT. That's 773-763-9278. Now, as you just heard on the news, the big concern and heartbreak is the loss of one of our National Guard, a beautiful young woman and a beautiful young man fighting for his life, who were sent by our president for the completely pointless task of patrolling Washington, D.C. There are so many ways this is wrong. I have been in Washington since the Guard showed up, and there's nothing for them to do. I mean, it's just a city doing what a city does, except that they're targets for every nutball with some crazy voice in his or her head saying that this is how I will serve my crazy voice in my head. And on every level, what has just happened is tragic. It's tragic for the victims. It's tragic for every refugee who is now going to have an impossible time becoming part of the fabric of this country. It's tragic for the families of those injured. It's tragic for the family of the shooter. And what does our president do? He is an expert on making things worse. If you want to know what I think Donald Trump is really good at, it's making things worse. Anything that's bad, anything that's horrible, anything that's tragic, just hand it over to Donald Trump and he'll figure out a way to make it worse. If you are a minority in this country of any sort, religious, ethnic, racial, I'm guessing you have what I have when somebody does something insane and violent and awful or evil or criminal. I'm guessing you have this moment where they haven't announced the name of the alleged perpetrator and you think, please, God, let it not be one of, fill in name of ethnic group here. Fill in name of oppressed class here. Fill in name of people facing stereotypes and discrimination here. And I'm absolutely certain that before the name of the alleged shooter of these two National Guard members was announced, every single ethnic group, every single religious minority, every single person who has been victimized by this administration, which is pretty much everybody who's not acceptable to the KKK, thought, oh, please, God, let it not be one of us. And the wheel spun, and the double whammy, likely a Muslim and a refugee. And now they're talking about deporting his family. There's so many ways that this could have been handled better. The National Guard ought never be in civilian patrol. We don't need them there. We've talked about this to a fairly well. And what does Trump do to make it worse? Let's get 500 more moving targets for crazy people. Let's send 500 more National Guard to Washington, D.C., even though a court just said you really can't do that. And what does Trump do? At Stephen Miller's behest, I have no doubt. What does he do? Let's stop anyone coming in from what he formerly called a bleep hole country. That suits him to a T. That's great. That's great ammo for him. It may sound cynical and it may sound cruel, but I don't think Donald Trump cares about anybody except himself and his immediate family. And I'm not so sure he cares at all about these National Guard troops. But what he does care about is that this is going to give him and his nutball followers permission. I shouldn't call them nutball. They have their reasons. Let me revise. His true believers. This is going to give them all the ammunition, you should pardon the phrase, that they need to say, you know, this is what happens when we let these people. I think one of the scariest things about Donald Trump is that you don't get to be an individual. You don't get to be a person with your own history, even if it's a history of mental illness, even if it's a history of violence. You don't get to be yourself. You get to represent an entire ethnic group, an entire religious group, an entire group of asylum seekers or minorities or any other group. You're not yourself to him. You're a symbol of everything that he wants to throw into a bucket. And he uses it. He uses it in the same way that if you are any kind of minority in this country and you think, oh, please let it not be one of ours. He's thinking, great, this is one of theirs. I'll use this. This'll work. This'll work. It's cynical. It's ugly. It's wrong. It leads to violence. And it's sad for the country. And it's tragic for the people. And it sows discord because all of a sudden you look at your neighbor you've known all your life, the nice person who maybe came here from somewhere else, has an accent, eats slightly different foods, maybe takes different holidays. And all of a sudden that person's not a person anymore. All of a sudden that person is a whole group of people. You're not allowed to see that person. You have to see all the folks who've been lumped into the bucket with that person. And we all, at our Thanksgiving tables a couple of days ago, I'm sure you sat around and thought, what can we do? Are we truly powerless? Do we really have no options here? When we can't believe our government, when we know our government is working against America as a unified country, we have to look each other in the eye and say, this is not this is an isolated individual. This is one person with trouble or evil even, or bad, wrong, awful, but one, just one. God forbid. I mean, would we, for example, decide, that if a Catholic priest misbehaved with youth, that all Catholics, we would never. If a youth leader at some evangelical youth camp misbehaved with youth, would we say all No, we would never. We would not. We would extend to them grace and acceptance and say, that's just one person. These other people are doing the best they can according to their faith, according to their morals. This is one damaged person. But somehow now with this president, we're supposed to throw people into the ugliest of baskets and act as if we're all passing judgment on the whole group of people. And if you succumb to that temptation to say, oh yeah, they're all like that, be aware, because there's probably some group you belong to, and sooner or later that needle will spin and it'll turn to you and you'll try to say, no, I'm an individual. I'm not that. It's going to happen. So the fight right now is to make sure we look at people as individuals and we stand up to these folks saying, no, you don't get to do that. I'm going to embrace virtually, not physically. You're not going to run up and throw your arms around them. I'm going to embrace my neighbors who are different than I. I'm going to embrace the people who live in my city who don't look like me or speak like me or come from where I come from or worship as I worship. We're going to do that. And we're especially going to do it this Thanksgiving weekend, because this is the time when, save the indigenous folks here who've been here way longer than we have, we get to be grateful that we're here. Coming up on the Edwin Eisendrath, it's the Democracy Stupid Show. You're going to meet some great folks. You're going to, because it's Thanksgiving, a holiday of abundance, you're going to meet Danielle Perry. You may have already met her. I know she was on Joan's show a few weeks ago. The policy director for the Illinois Food Depository. We're going to talk a little bit about Ernst & Young's plan for solvency in Chicago with one of my favorite folks, Greg Hines. We've got some music to introduce you to. The Arab Blues, they're doing a show in Evanston. So many people for you to meet. And one of my favorite ex-Republicans. Stick around. We're WCPT, where facts matter.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
Ms. Danielle Perry, I am so glad you could join us. A holiday weekend, mayhem everywhere, and here you are, Vice President of Policy and Advocacy for the Greater Chicago Food Depository, which doesn't even fit on a card. That's probably why people don't have cards anymore, because you do so much. And welcome to WCPT. Well,
thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanksgiving, holy smokes. And in the last couple of weeks, it's been, well, let's see, we had the big, beautiful bill that cut food benefits, and then we had the shutdown and the dissolving of SNAP, and meanwhile there are still people who need to eat. So what did our food bank here in Chicago, what was the response? What was the process for you?
We immediately pushed out all the food we had in our inventory to our pantries. We increased the amount of food in our pantries by about 20%. We started ordering more food than we have in a long time. It was like the COVID days here. We saw in just those weeks during the shutdown and even the week before, we saw over 240,000 households visit our network.
Wow.
And that is an all-time high. We see more than we did at the height of COVID. And that includes not just our normal pantry visits, soup kitchens, and shelters, but also we started something new. During the weekends of the shutdown, we did additional hubs in communities that we knew had high numbers of SNAP participants. We did shelf-stable boxes. The things inside were like things you could make spaghetti with or chili with, things you could stretch. So we made those boxes and we distributed those in hubs across the city and honestly the suburbs as well. And that we were able to serve so many people with those hubs and with our additional food in our network.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting that you mentioned the suburbs as well. I think I grew up in a suburb and I now live in Uptown between two pantries, actually. And I think there's this perception that, oh, well, if you live in the suburbs, you got it all together. And I know for a certainty that even when I grew up, when dinosaurs roamed the planet, there were people who were really struggling. And there was a lot of embarrassment about that. It took the form when I grew up, me and the dinosaurs, that the people I knew, there would be like a divorce. And maybe it was everything would change. The fancy house would go. The child support maybe didn't come in. Perhaps the guardian parent who hadn't been working before, who had been home with kids, had to figure out how to take care of kids and work. the shame of the whole thing was what I picked up on from the kids, that everything had changed. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about the different communities that you serve and the psychological feeling of I'm going to go get help putting food on the table now.
Well, we are Cook County's food bank. So we are in all the neighborhoods across the county, whether that's the south suburbs to the city itself, and even some of the western and northern suburbs that are still in the county. And we have pantries, soup kitchens, and shelters in almost every neighborhood. We do have what we call priority communities here, places where we see high levels of poverty and where we see more need for pantries. But it's truly a part of every neighborhood that exists. We really do see need. I would say just in the last few weeks, we saw a 50% increase in our network.
Wow.
And what that tells you is that pause to SNAP really impacted people. What I think SNAP does when it comes to the things you were saying around shame and dignity is SNAP gives people money to supplement their budget, to go in the store and buy what they need, to go and be able to have that purchasing power, to be creative, to put those meals together and stretch the dollar to be able to feed an entire household. And we already knew that SNAP was the most powerful and effective anti-hunger tool in America. But this data point of 50% more visits to the pantries in this period tells you how many people were really using it and how powerful of a tool it really was.
When people come to the pantry, I would imagine, and you'll correct me, of course, if I'm wrong, when they see so many of their neighbors there, I would have to imagine that it eases somewhat the feeling of like, I'm the only one who can't figure out how to feed my family. Do you get any feedback on that of like, there's a community here of people and we're all in this together? Or do people just kind of duck, grab their box and run? What happens at the food pickup point?
You are 100% right. I'm actually pretty new to the food depository. I started just this year. And when I started, I got to go and visit some pantries. And that is exactly the way you're describing it is what I saw. You see community there. You see people who come on that same day and they know Miss Jenkins, who's been working in that pantry for many years. You see, I saw relationships that day. I saw pride. I also saw choice. Beautiful. Some of these pantries are gorgeous and they have options and it looks like a store. Some of these pantries even look like stores. They give people the ability to make choices and choose what they want. Lots of variety. And I was really impressed with the amount of dignity and pride that came with it and gratefulness. I remember standing outside of a pantry and a woman had her box on the ground. She pulled up her car and I picked up her box and put it in her car. And she said, "You guys have already done enough." She was just so grateful that we were providing the food. Me helping her with her box felt like too much. And I said, it's never too much. We are here to be helped. And I love that that's what the food depository stands for in people's communities. Like she knew from the emblem on my shirt who we were and what we do. And I was really excited to have joined a place with that much pride and that community respects and has pride for as well.
I have a story for you. We volunteer, my family, there's something called the Ezra Cafe. I don't know if you know it. It's for everybody, but it happens to be run by the Jewish community, which is my community of origin. And we wait tables there once a month. And the most interesting thing, so the way this works is there's a menu and people get a choice what they want. They don't have to eat what they don't want. And you wait their table and whatever drink. And if they want 50,000 honeys in their tea, well, so be it. And they get to choose. But after everyone is served, if they want company, because a lot of these folks live, kind of sequestered away, the seniors, they don't see a lot of people, some of them. And if they want company, you sit down and you eat your meal with them if they want. And this woman I sat down with, and she said, you could have knocked me over. She said, I used to volunteer for a cafe like this. And I said, really? And she said, oh, yes, I lived in San Diego and I was married to a doctor and we used to volunteer at our church's cafe. And my jaw is kind of descending toward the table. And she says, yes, she says, but then I got divorced and I got cancer and I, live with very little now. She said, but I used to wait these tables for people and I'm just so glad they're here for me now. I had no answer. My
goodness.
Had no answer. But what I thought was, we all walk around, and now, ever since the shutdown, I open up my pantry and I think, this is abundance. This is bounty. And, 3 kinds of rice. I got 3 kinds of rice in my cabinet. But it could change. It can change. And I think as awful as all of this is that we've just gone through and will continue to go through, the idea that none of us has what we have by some sort of guarantee. I would imagine that volunteering at your food pantry and looking people in the eye who have your life or had your life, or, you could be them or they could be you. It's got to change the people who volunteer. Could you talk about your experience with the volunteers?
Yes, you're right. I just want to say you reminded me of something my mom always says. She always says, keep on living. Don't judge anybody and don't think that this can't happen to you. Life happens. And you've brought that up a couple times in this conversation. And I think, we all are a few life instances away from needing the support as well. So I just wanted to agree with you and affirm that that's true. Since I've been working at the food depository, one of the things I'm struck by are the number of volunteers every day. When you walk in, there's so many people coming to volunteer. They don't know if you work there or if you're a volunteer. We have so many consistent volunteers who give so much of their time. We also have the corporations that come in and volunteer at the food depository. But we also encourage people to find your local pantry and volunteer there as well. Mm-hmm. Coming to the food depository is a beautiful experience, but being a part of the fabric of your community and the work that's being done at your local pantry would be just as exciting to do. So I literally have seen volunteers here every day, some of which you can tell have their own things happening in their lives, whether that be fighting cancer or struggling to make ends meet too. But they are so committed to this work and to what we do. And they show up not just to volunteer with the food, but we even, I run policy and advocacy, and we ask some of our consistent volunteers to lend their voice to our policy agenda and maybe come down to Springfield with us and advocate. And I have seen people who help with the distribution of food come and join our advocacy team. They do so much here and they really love it. I've seen a lot of retirees also give to the food depository as volunteers like it's their full-time job. And I always say to myself, like, wow, is this what retirement will look like? Being able to do something like this that feeds your soul is pretty awesome. And they tell you that every day you see them.
That is nice. And my mom always said to me, you can give time or you can give money, but you can give something. There is this idea now that you should have a food drive and collect canned goods, and that's archaic now. That is not so useful, the collecting of the cans.
Yeah, I am always struck by the amount of food the food depository is able to purchase and get rescued or donated. Just last year, this network distributed more than 115 million pounds of food. Wow. That created 96 million meals and served 2.3 million households. Wow. That's a lot of food. Mm-hmm. And I tell people, particularly in the last few weeks, when you saw so many people saying, go buy an extra can of green beans, I tell people that with that amount of money you spent on that extra can, we could probably buy that many meals of food. We can stretch the dollar. We can buy cases of green beans for what you could buy a couple of green beans. And that's because of the whole concept of food banking. It's to purchase in bulk and then provide that to the local pantry, soup kitchen, and shelters in a way that stretches the dollar beyond what the average person could do. So if you really want to stretch your dollar, supporting the food bank is the number one way to do it.
Money, not the can of chicken soup.
Correct.
People like the feeling of, coming to the movies with a can of pineapple, And it doesn't feel as good maybe to come to the movies with, $10 in an envelope. But truly, if you want to have the most impact, it's the money that really enables people to do the most good. Let's talk a little bit about the veterans aspect of your program.
Well, the food depository provides food not just to our local pantries and shelters and soup kitchens, but we do things that some people don't know about. And you bringing up the veterans gives me a chance to say it. We do after-school meals. We do summer meals. We do meals for seniors, and we, get into the communities that we know typically have high insecurity in food, and that includes our veterans. The older adults meal program looks like actual home delivery, which we don't do with our normal produce, but home delivery of hot meals and frozen meals that people get twice a week. And so our seniors, particularly our veterans who participate in that program, are receiving those meals. We have a commercial high production kitchen here at the food depository that can produce up to 10,000 meals a day.
I had no idea. That's amazing. Where is that? New. Where did you stash that? In this city?
You first walk in, it's a new addition in the last year or so. But when you first walk in and you walk through the doors, when you go to volunteer, if you look left, you can see the new kitchen. Cool. And we do hope to scale that even more. And we're also using those meals in a new partnership we're doing with the city colleges. Mm-hmm. So at every city college where they have a pantry, we'll hope to have ready meals. We're doing it right now in a pilot with Kennedy King, and it seems to be going really well. And so you can go to the pantry at the city colleges, and now you can receive those meals that you can warm up right on campus or take home.
Are you saying that all the community colleges in Chicago and surrounding area now have a pantry? I did not know that.
Absolutely.
Say more.
Yeah, we're hoping to not only just have the pantries, but to turn them into beautiful stores. They look great now, but we want to make them even better. Their goal is to make sure every student who needs it, who is food insecure, has food and really has food for life. So the education they have can change the trajectory of their career and economic status. So not just food today, but food for life. We had briefings at every city college about the changes to SNAP after the big, beautiful bill passed. And they were well received. We have virtual ones and in-person ones. We talked about the eligibility changes for work. We talked about the changes that the Illinois Department of Human Services will be doing around SNAP. And many of the students were appreciative. And we had enrollers from our staff who came and helped people enroll in SNAP and also talk them through the changes that they're going to see because of the big, beautiful bill. And we're expanding that as well, having enrollers at every city college to help these students long-term with the benefit changes to SNAP.
I'll watch for that. I teach over at Truman once a year. I do a little class for them. So I will inquire and go around and see what there is to see. Here's kind of a tricky one. When I lived in Oakland, California, which was not that long ago, but for many years, and I was doing a volunteer writing program in one of the really under-resourced high schools in Oakland, which is that's almost all the high schools in Oakland, California. And they had a cart that went round every morning with bagels and cream cheese and fresh fruit, and it was kind of disheartening to see that the kids just didn't. There was a huge amount of waste. And I think that there were a lot of kids who just kind of didn't know what to do with, this is going to sound awful, but with fresh food, that wasn't what they were accustomed to being served. Am I reading that wrong? I mean, I never asked anybody. I was embarrassed to say anything, or certainly wouldn't have said anything to the kids, but I noticed you do nutrition education and outreach. Is there a mismatch between kids who grow up maybe with really under-resourced kitchens and what's available to them in supportive programs? I would see it at my kids' Chicago Public High School too, where people would eat the dessert and toss and God bless Michelle Obama, who insisted that you have the good stuff, and people would just take the good stuff and throw it in the trash. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's interesting that you said that, because one of my favorite stories is I lived in D.C. for a long time. Went to college and law school in D.C. and worked both on the Hill and for the Obama administration in agriculture. So it's interesting that I do think people have this perception that folks just haven't been exposed to certain foods and then subsequently don't like it. But I remember driving through D.C. and going past a elementary school, public elementary school, and all the kids were walking down the street eating apples.
Oh, good.
And it was around the time of Michelle Obama.
I feel better.
No, I just I remember this day like yesterday, because I do think that exposure does, some people just won't like it. But I think a lot of folks, once exposed and when provided with the things that they need or fresh produce, that they will enjoy it, especially if they're given it in more frequency than they're given other things that they don't need. And I remember this day because it reminded me of the fact that when given the apple, they were enjoying it. I don't think it's always assumed any kid will want some chips and cookies. It doesn't matter where they live or where they live.
The chocolate milk. It was the chocolate milk every time. But I
remember as a kid, the cartons of chocolate milk. And one of the things we did was we helped to create school and community gardens across the country through the Department of Agriculture during my time in the administration. And we helped kids build out gardens at their schools. And I remember kids saying, okay, we want a salsa garden. We want to grow tomatoes, onions, peppers. And I remember going there and building it with them, and then going there when they had their first harvest, and they made that salsa and they ate it up, So the ownership in it, the exposure to it, the frequency of it will prove, in my opinion, that these kids, once given what they need, will love it. It's just, I hate the assumption that they won't.
No, well, it wasn't an assumption. I mean, I actually saw it with my own eyes. The cart. We just have to keep doing it. And I think we have to give people things that are quality. Just because you provide an after-school meal doesn't mean it's something any kid will want. And so we have to keep upping the quality, continuing to provide it, and being consistent. And I do think kids will continue to enjoy. You make me think about the fact that as we do things in community, we also have to think about culturally competent food, things that certain communities eat. And that's one of the things we work on my team as well. So not only do I do policy and advocacy, but we do community engagement on this team. If our mission is to end hunger, we can't just put food in the emergency food system. We have to think about, why are people in the line to begin with? Is it because they don't have access to jobs? Is it because their community doesn't have the transportation they need? Is it because there's not enough economic development in the community to find said job, or the education or resources that they're receiving are just subpar? I would love it if you would share a story or two from a contact that you've had.
So I have been in the last few months focused on the changes to SNAP. And that work has really led me across the city to do presentations about the big, beautiful bill and the cuts to SNAP at churches, at a lot of local organizations like workforce development nonprofits. Even most recently met with the leadership of the Illinois Community Health Workers Association. And I will tell you, at each of these stops I've made, I have met extraordinary people who already do so much community work and are willing to join this fight in getting the word out around SNAP. I have stood in churches with hundreds of people, and after the service, women who probably are in their 80s and 90s telling me, I'll join the team. I will come and I will go out with you. We will talk about these changes. I will go and I'll talk to my book club or the usher board, and we could be your advocate leaders. And I don't need to get paid, sweetheart, but you just tell me what I need to say and we will sign people up. And my spirit is warmed by the fact that no matter where you go, there are people who are willing to join the fight, who are willing to lift the word up around SNAP and these changes. They don't want to see anybody in our community lose out on their food benefits because they didn't know that they're required to work 80 hours and prove that they're working. They're willing to, set up a table outside the church every Sunday and talk about this with their neighbors. I love the level of ownership and support that I have seen and people's willingness to join this fight, not just go to Springfield, but to talk to their neighbors and share the changes and make sure that everybody has what they need.
How did we lure you from D.C. to Chicago? How did we get so lucky? How did we do that?
I grew up here. I'm from the south suburbs of Chicago. I went to Homewood Flossmoor High School. I'm homegrown. I did love D.C., but it was time to come home. So I'm happy to be here. It's interesting that it's such a crisis. We have never seen this type of devastation to our safety net. It's not just SNAP, it's Medicaid and so many other things that were cut in that big, beautiful bill. This is a moment in history. We will see the impacts of this for the coming years. SNAP will be first. We could likely see 500,000 people lose their benefits in the next few months from SNAP. And so I'm happy to be home to do this work and to join the fight to save SNAP and to save our safety net. I think the people of Chicago deserve it, and I'm happy to do it.
Well, we're really lucky to have you. If people want to volunteer, what should they do? Where should they go?
Chicago's Food Bank.org is our website. You can look to volunteer, you can donate, but you can also look for the advocacy and policy page. We'd love for you to join our advocacy.
You're really pushing that advocacy and policy page. That's a big one, it sounds like. You want to get the people.
Yes. It could take different forms. You could send a letter to your congressman by easily just typing in your information, and you could send a letter quickly to your congressman to say, we need to reverse the changes to SNAP and Medicaid in the big, beautiful bill.
Which works better if you have a congressperson who actually voted in favor of that big, beautiful bill. I mean,
absolutely.
It's kind of redundant if your congressperson is already on the warpath, or in this case, our governor is already fighting hard. But there are people who listen to this radio station and get this podcast who actually live in the districts of people who voted to end SNAP, essentially, or cut it. And you are especially needed because those folks who voted in favor of cutting all these benefits, they represent you. And if they're not representing you, you should let them know. Danielle Perry, thank you so much for joining me, Turi Ryder, on WCPT to talk about your work. I hope your holiday weekend goes well, and thanks again for getting right back to it and doing this good work.
Thanks for having me.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid, on WCPT 820.
It is Edwin's show. It's the Democracy, Stupid. I am Turi Ryder, usually here on Sundays, as I will be tomorrow at 2, and I hope you'll join me then. But right now, somebody who can maybe finally seriously answer a question has been driving me bananas. As you know, especially if you live in Chicago, we have a mayor who seems to want to chart his own path, and in my opinion, regardless of where the facts would direct him. Regardless of what kind of hell it rains down on people who are trying to pay their taxes or build their businesses. I'm not a Johnson fan. I believe you know this by now. I don't think he knows what the heck he's doing. I think he's got some kind of philosophy, and if you disagree with him, he just shoves you off the end of the pier. And this was especially reinforced by a study that was done by Ernst & Young, accounting firm for the city, at some cost. About $3 million was spent on this thing to find some savings, and they found them. And then the mayor tried to bury it, I guess, and then ignore it. To sort this out, I'm pretty much a super fan of Crane's editorialist and reporter Greg Hines of Crane's Chicago Business. I'm a super fan. Greg, welcome back to WCPT. Tell me what on earth is going on with this report.
Well, that's a good question. The mayor did finally release it. He released it the same day he released his budget, but it had been sitting around for some weeks, if not months beforehand. A lot of aldermen were complaining and said, hey, to judge your budget and whether you're justified in asking taxpayers to dig in deeper and pay more, you ought to look at the expense side of the equation first, and are there some ideas in there that we could use? Well, he did finally release a report, but only after he released his budget that called for draining TIF resources, imposing a tax on big employers in the city, and so forth. And the question is there money in there that could be saved particularly for the short run, but perhaps a little bit further down the term, so that we can provide some relief to taxpayers who are screaming their heads off right now.
It looked like there was both. This report looked like there were both possibilities, yes?
Yes. Now, not everything in that report can be implemented immediately. For instance, it was well over $100 million they said could be saved by reducing the number of managers. It's middle level people who supervise. It would take a while to do some of that, but stuff like being more sensible in buying city vehicles, so that the same vehicle isn't bought by three different departments and it's in the garages for the most part.
Yeah, that one really stuck out. They're putting 7,000 miles a year on a vehicle, whereas other cities typically put 3-4 times that on a city vehicle. Have I got that right?
Something like that in some cases. There's certainly some money to be saved there. I think even the Johnson people have admitted that, maybe we can do a little more. A little harder is limits on health insurance. There are some people who think that the city's health insurance policies are a little bit too generous. That if we made some reasonable things and cut some costs there, that we could save taxpayers some money without really hurting health care services to people. That's a 9-figure figure. So there's money there to be saved, and you can't do it all immediately. But if you say you're going to do it over the next several months, you can limit what you have to tax now, and more importantly, cut the deficit for next year, because by all indications we're going to face another $1 billion deficit next year.
So yes, we're in big fat trouble with our budget. Here comes this budget with the immediate savings, and then a little further down the road. And you're right about the managers. We may need fewer managers, but we don't have Elon Musk and Doge, thank goodness, just willy-nilly slashing people's jobs, because that's real damage. But certainly we could do some planning and say, when this...
They said you could save up to $250 million a year if you reduce managers. That's a pretty big number.
That's a pretty big number. And you could do it, eventually through attrition. You could say, you're going to retire. Great. We're going to combine your department and manage it under this other department. And that can happen organically, naturally. What is the reason that the mayor gets dug in like this and interprets any kind of, and this is my read on it, I think the mayor regards any kind of different opinion as somehow obstructionist, oppositional, betrayal. He takes this stuff very personally. I've seldom seen a mayor with such thin skin who is willing to sacrifice the well-being of the city for what, to me, from here, looks like his own ego.
Well, I will admit that there is a little bit of Donald Trump in Brendan Johnson's governance style. He tends to go my way or the highway and, shut up, I know what I'm talking about, just do what you're told. That doesn't work in politics. It is starting to break down with Trump, and it certainly broke down in the city council. But to answer your question, I gave you 3 reasons. One, the mayor clearly wants to continue some of the social welfare programs that were originally funded with federal ARPA money, COVID relief money. Some of those programs are helpful. Maybe most of them are helpful. And nobody wants to take away services, but the business of governance is you have to weigh costs and benefits on both sides. How much do you want to hurt taxpayers by, for instance, limiting job growth with this head tax to pay for social welfare programs? That's part of it. I understand why the mayor wants to use Trump as a foil. I probably would too. He says, "Hey, we're trying to stand tough against this mean guy in Washington, so we got to bulk up locally." But there's a cost to all this stuff, and people who got their property taxes bills recently are screaming their heads off, so much so that Johnson doesn't want to raise property taxes, although that could end up on the table. It's the one that's really generated all the heat is this head tax.
Yeah. This is.
Says, we want to tax billionaires and wealthy corporations. Well, I'm for taxing big corporations, and I'm for taxing billionaires, but But you have to be, like anything else in life, you have to be smart about it. And if you just do it just in the city of Chicago and just on Chicago employers, guess what? The employers, they go to Wisconsin.
Yeah, they're not stupid. They're not stupid.
Yeah, they go to Indiana. So what you do is you end up depriving Chicagoans who need jobs, or you make them relocate out to the suburbs.
Or it costs them more to get to their job.
Or the employer sucks it up and says, okay, we'll give you your money, Brennan, but the next time we're going to have pay raises for our staff. We're going to cut them. You're going to have the pay increase you were going to get this year because we got to put the money into the city budget rather than your pocket.
It's really weird. There seems to be, I mean, it's like the joke about the communists and the shirts. You know, the communist and the shirt joke? Where the young communist is... So the young communist is asking the old communist. So explain to me again now, if in communism, if you have 3 Maseratis and I have none, you have to give me one of your Maseratis. And the older communist says, yeah, that's how communism works. I have to give you one of my Maseratis, 5.3, and you have none. And if you have 2 vacation homes in Wisconsin and I have no vacation home in Wisconsin, you have to give one to me. And the old communist says, that's communism. Yeah, I have to give you one of my vacation homes in Wisconsin. And then he says, so if you have 2 nice shirts and I don't have a nice shirt, you have to give me one of your nice shirts. And the old communist says, no, it doesn't work like that. And the young communist says, well, why not? And the old communist says, because I actually have 2 nice shirts. So there's this idea in Johnson's administration that mythically these corporations have everything to give away. But in reality, they do have some things. And why should they? Why should they, as you point out, have to give away money that they're not communists. They're capitalists. They're creating jobs and income, and they have loyalty to their customers and stockholders. And they're not just going to give away one of the shirts because they don't have to.
Well, I do think there's an argument to be made, like I suggested before, that rich people, really rich people, and corporations don't carry their fair share of the load in this country. But you can't really do that at a local level. We tried to do it at a state level. Remember the graduated income tax proposal a few years ago? We got rejected overwhelmingly.
Well, I'm going to pause you right there. One of in my opinion, the problem with Governor Pritzker's tax, is that the one you're talking about, is that it got such a terrible name that nobody really knew what it was. People were voting on this thing. They did not know what it was. And if they had simply named it accurately, I believe that people would have passed it. But they gave it this very confusing. People I know who are reasonably well informed had no idea what this thing was. But you're right. People will vote to support an entire tax on an entire group of millionaires and billionaires. That's what Elizabeth Warren ran on. That's why we loved her so much. And the idea that, you can somehow just pick out the city of Chicago and say, we're going to pick you guys because we can. The response is going to be, well, I don't have to. I can go live in Lake Forest. I can go set up my business in Elgin.
I do think we live in I agree with that. And beyond that, I think we live in a somewhat different era now where it's particularly difficult to raise taxes because people aren't convinced they're getting their money's worth. The taxes go up, the services are, maybe they're there, maybe they're not. You have to go out, if you're going to raise taxes, you have to convince people that, folks, we've really sweated all the costs out of our government. We've crimped and we saved, and we're not giving the money away. We've got to be tough, and we have no other. Look at all the wonderful things we've done to cut taxes. If you did that, then maybe people would be more willing to pay for the services.
That's an excellent observation. There is a perception, and you can see it if you live in the city of Chicago, that there's a lot of waste, and some things in the city work beautifully, some things are a joy, and some things you just shake your head and go, well, this isn't running very well. And to your point, if people see that you have cut all the fat, that you have done everything that you can do, then people in Chicago are they want to help. We are a city of people who step up and say, yeah, we'll participate. But if they just feel like they're being fleeced at every turn, then they quite reasonably say, what the heck? So how did all of this land with the city council? Where are we with that, with the few minutes we have available?
Where we are is that the mayor's initial revenue proposal was rejected in the finance committee by an overwhelming 10 to 25 vote. A group of aldermen have been meeting with labor people. They've been meeting with business people and trying to hatch out what it would amount to at least a partial alternate budget. We haven't seen it yet. There's some disagreements among those people. I don't know if we're going to see it. It could end up being just a big mess. But look, the alders are clearly not very happy with what's on the table. One other point I want to make is that one of the odd features of Johnson's budget, it really hasn't gotten enough publicity, is that the real beneficiary of his budget isn't so much the city of Chicago, it's the Chicago Teachers Union. And that's
wow. Why would that be, do you suppose? Why would that be?
And that's because this big $1 billion surplus or $900 million surplus in TIF accounts, tax income finance accounts, that he wants to declare surplus, which means the money goes to the taxing bodies. Well, under the state law, it goes to the taxing bodies in proportion to the normal bill. So more than half of this money goes to the Chicago Board of Education. And what does the Board of Education do? The same thing recently that they've done for on and off for the last decade. They keep approving these big contracts that hire people. They don't have a way to pay for it. I want to help the kids. Everybody would like to see a librarian in every school. Whatever,
I would.
But they haven't closed,
for sure.
But they haven't. But you have schools out there that have 50 kids in them, but a full staff. There's clearly waste there. And when they pass these big budgets. The CTU, which Johnson used to work for, says, "Oh, we're going to pay for. We're going to get progressive revenues to pay for. We're going to go to Springfield. We're going to zap billionaires and rich companies." Well, it doesn't happen. That means the money has to come from what? The property tax. Of this big surplus, the city only gets about 20%.
Yeah, I am a parent of two very well-educated Chicago public school students, and we've marched picket lines with teachers, but again, this idea that there's some group that's going to be exempt from having to cut a little fat, that whole idea is going to have to go. And to be painted as someone who doesn't respect teachers or like them or appreciate their work just because you say there ought not be a school built for 300 people with 50 kids in it and a full staff. It's unfair. It's unfair because people.
There are dozens of schools in this town right now that have only a very small fraction of the number of kids that they were built to do. And I know that closing schools really sets off a lot of angst in neighborhoods. Schools tend to hold neighborhoods together, and nobody wants to lose their schools. But at the same time, nobody wants to lose their house because they can't afford to pay the property tax.
I think you put it very well. And I think we're going to have to leave it there. But that's really what did in Rahm Emanuel. He gave people the medicine, and without the spoonful of sugar, it did not go down. Well, I'm sure our paths will cross again. I'm so grateful for your explanation. I love your column. Please keep writing. Please keep analyzing. And I'll keep sitting in my living room reading it and going, yeah, what he said.
Nice of you to say.
Thank you. That's Greg Hines of Crane's Chicago Business with a view over the Ernst & Young Chicago plan of how we could save some money. I hope the mayor pays attention because just as Mr. Hines said, when you do your part, we are happy to do ours. It's Edwin Eisendrath's show. It's The Democracy Stupid on WCPT, where facts matter.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy Stupid on WCPT 820.
It's 4 minutes after 2 o'clock. I'm Turi Ryder in for Edwin Eisendrath. Thank you all for being here on this Thanksgiving weekend. Thank you for, I shouldn't thank you quite so much. I mean, what better place to be on a snowy day than huddled around warm, cozy radio? You can just feel that warmth, that spirit of community. Interesting text. And by the way, if you want to join us, we get your texts and your calls at the same number, 773-763-WCPT. Or for those of you with the modern phone that does not have letters, which many of them don't, that's 773-763-9278. This came in from Andy. I was kind of surprised. Please explain to me why the mayor needs a chief of faith engagement. Did past mayors have them? In Mayor Johnson's case, it is Pastor Billy I don't want to call him out of his name. Jamal Evans. He is paid in excess of $100,000. Please explain this. Well, first of all, I do not know for a certainty that he's paid the $172,000 that he's alleged to be paid. I'm seeing that, on the internet. I didn't have enough warning to look it up in the city's budget. So that is what we have to stash in the speculator. We don't know for sure. If you've got absolute proof, please text it. I'll check it out for sure. But I will say that if it turns out we are paying a chief of faith, I do certainly believe that people who work for houses of worship should be paid for the work that they do. But Chicago is not a house of worship. So in the same way that I think a nice big fat savings that we could make in the city of Chicago's budget would be to not have a budget for the mayor's wife to redecorate her office in the cultural center, I would also campaign for saying, you want to be the chief of faith? Great. Enjoy the rubber chicken dinner that you go to open and share for free. Money, nada. We do not need to pay somebody for that is my answer, assuming that we do. I love, please explain. How could I explain that? How would you explain that? People going, in need of jobs and warm clothes and suitable housing, and you're going to pay allegedly $170-something thousand a year for a chief of faith? No, thank you. If that is accurate, then in my opinion, Turi Ryder, in for Edwin Eisendrath, that is horsewash. That is my thought. Also, this text, the mayor says he cannot close schools because it will cause children to cross gang lines if they were to go to different schools. That's a serious concern. Why not use buses to safely transport them? Isn't this the case of the inmates or gangs running the institution? I've heard this conversation, and we did get the safe conduct guards ushering children to and from school. I had a big fight about this with a girlfriend of mine who is now a retired Chicago public school teacher. And I said, well, this is something that will, of necessity, have to happen. Little children are going to have to get to school. But in point of fact, there's gang violence going on. I mean, you remember at Schurz High School last year, there was gang shooting. There's no guarantee that you cross the street and something bad will happen. I was in Chicago when the gangs started marking out their territory decades ago. Kids usually get a safe conduct pass. But here's the thing. If the kid gets a really good education and there are chaperones, or in the case of the person who texted this, if there are buses, or if there are extra police patrols posted during school hours, and the kids end up with a better education in the end, doesn't that make it worth your while as a parent? Because frankly, kids, God help them, the poor souls are getting shot, when they get shot in random violence, regardless of whether they're in this block or that block. I think it's a false argument. Now, my friend, the former public school teacher, said, but the schools function as cultural centers and community magnets. And my response to that is, you want a cultural center? You want a community magnet? Then build an actual cultural center in that school. Staff it with the appropriate people for a cultural center, for a community center. If you want to have an adult education class there, then open it up for that purpose. Close off the part you're not using. You don't have to heat it. You don't have to furnish it. There are a lot of ways that we can take costs and cut them in order to increase the benefit to Chicago's children. Because really, in the end, if your kid has 35 kids in a school that was meant to hold 100, ask yourself, are they really getting all the great opportunities? Are they going to get the school music program? Are they going to get the art program? Are they going to get the extra reading program? Of course they're not. So if you really want to prioritize the kids, some of these schools are going to have to close for the sake of the kids. It's just about 10 minutes after 2. Snow still coming down. It didn't happen on Thanksgiving, but I'm curious. I want to ask you, before we meet our next folks, on a much lighter note, actually, we're going to have some music for you. Very cool. What did your family talk about on Thanksgiving? We heard all kinds of advice about how to avoid politics, how to get along with wacky Uncle Carl, who wants to talk about how great Trump is and right out of the illegals. We got all kinds of advice on how to maneuver. How did your family maneuver the political scene around the Thanksgiving table? Was it verboten? Did you dedicate some time to it? It was very interesting where we were for Thanksgiving. There was a Middle East conversation, and there were 3 generations of people, and everyone had a well-considered opinion, and they were not all the same. People were respectful. One mother got outraged at her children's what she considered ill-informed views. You're getting your news off TikTok. But it was really an interesting opportunity to have a diverse conversation from many different viewpoints about a particular issue that was close to the hearts of everyone at the table. How did it go for you? 773-763-9278 WCPT. I'm Turi with a U, Ryder like the truck, in for Edwin. And I was talking to Paul, our wonderful engineer here. He said, we do a different Thanksgiving. We order in the stuff we like. We hang out. Any political conversation around your table, Paul? Nothing. Everybody already knows what everybody else thinks. Yeah. It's interesting that, this idea that you only want to talk to people who disagree with you and that you can't do it without screaming and yelling, I'm not so sure that's true. I think if people hear you listening, if they feel that you're really listening to them, they're willing to share in a neutral way. But maybe that's just some people. I only had one friend who was so dogmatic that you really couldn't have a conversation with him. One. And I think I may have mentioned on another show that it was actually very sad. He was so angry. He was so furious. He was so convinced that, women were out to neuter men and illegal people were coming here to ruin the country. And he was an Islamophobe. He was, he was communism and socialism and just every word he could think of, he would throw. And at one point, I said to him, because we go way back. He was a 2-time Obama voter. Something had shifted in him. And I said, do you still want to be my friend? Do you still want to actually talk to me? Because I've tried really hard to avoid political conversations with you. And I'm still getting 5 emails a day. You and your... God bless my friend. We were at a No King's Day, the first one, the March. We were in California for a wedding. And he must have watched 5 hours of March footage and found me and the spousal unit marching on No King's Day and sent the image. He must have invested 5, 6, 7 hours watching this camera footage. It meant that much to him to send the image and make some nasty remarks. And when I said, do you want to be my friend? If this is how you feel about me and this is how you feel about people who disagree with you, if we're not just of a different opinion, but evil and bad and wrong, do you want us in your life? And he really was upset. No, of course. You're like family. You're like a sister. And I thought, you would never use that language to my face that you're sending me in these emails. The C word, the B word, every kind of nasty. And at that moment, I had picked up the phone and called. We had a decent conversation. But I'm not sure what he felt entitled him to send these terrible messages, accusatory, condemnatory messages by email And yet, I think if he'd been at my Thanksgiving table, he would have had a conversation. I'd like to believe that. So please feel free to text or send or call and tell me, how did it go for you at Thanksgiving? Did you consciously not invite people who you knew would be opposed to your views? Did you instruct the kids, okay, no matter what you say, Uncle Ted is going to go on and on about ice, and you're just going to, let Uncle Ted go on and on about ice. Don't argue with Uncle Ted. He's set in his ways. Just let him go. How did you manage it? How did you function? Did it go well? Another note I want to just bring up, because it just happened today. So much news, even over the weekend. My favorite playwright, Tom Stoppard, has died at 88. My favorite contemporary playwright. He won an Oscar for Shakespeare in Love. He did Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. The first play I ever saw that he wrote was called Jumpers. I'd seen his shows in England, and I've seen them here. And Tom Stoppard was interesting. He wasn't really told, by the way, that his parents were Holocaust survivors till he was a young man. They wanted to protect him, so they didn't really talk about it. And then he had to go explore his roots as an adult. He'd been only sort of vaguely aware that his parents, his original biological father who had died, was a Holocaust refugee, as was his mother. They hid it, as a lot of parents did, to spare their children. So that factored into his later work. But Tom Stoppard, I think my favorite quote of all time, from a play that Tom Stoppard wrote decades and decades ago called Jumpers. And I will give this to you because you're going to find it useful. Tom Stoppard said in this show, in this play, "There is no problem in the world that is not solvable given a large enough plastic bag." And I thought, when you think about it, there is no problem in this world that's not solvable given a large enough plastic bag. And later in the show, somebody dies. And of course, they carry the person out in giant contractor bag. But when you stop to think about it, if you had to pick an invention that really solved a lot of problems in this generation and caused them to, in an environmental sense, but in the immediate sense, if you need to solve a problem, I'd say 8 times out of 10, you can solve it given a large enough plastic bag. If you've had a problem picking out some great music and some wonderful cultural experiences to have, there's one coming up in Evanston, and you're going to meet the artists in just a moment. 17 minutes after 2 o'clock, I'm Turi Ryder for Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT, where facts matter.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid, on WCPT 820.
Well, it happens. This is the beauty of real live radio. Sometimes things go awry. We are unable to connect with the folks who are going to be performing at Nichols Hall on the 3rd of December. I almost hate to think, it's snowing. Maybe they got stuck in a drift. I know they closed part of the entrance ramp to 9094 today. So maybe they were making their way to the gig on the 3rd, and something went amok. Or being the musicians that they are, maybe they just locked themselves in the studio and lost all track of time. I'd love for you to hear a little sample of what they do, even if we can't reach them, because their music is so interesting. One of them is of, I believe, Lebanese and Egyptian descent, and the other of Egyptian descent. I may have that wrong, but they use, and one of them is a professor in his day job at Columbia College here in Chicago, home of the blues, and they use traditional Arab Middle Eastern instruments to perform blues music. So even if we don't get to speak with Arab blues who are performing, as mentioned, on the 3rd at Nichols Hall in Evanston, just here's a little sample of why I wanted you to meet them. You see why I thought that was so cool? They got it all in there, didn't they? So I was really hoping to introduce you guys to them, and it did not happen. But that's okay, because the beauty of Real Live Radio and having the WCPT crew here is that we've got, since we are just about the only progressive talk outfit here in this town, and for, as far as I can tell, miles around, there is no shortage of things that we can talk about. There is no shortage of things for us to talk about. Did you see the latest indignity to come out of Washington, D.C.? You may not have noticed that there was a new appointment made by Kennedy to the Department of Health and Human Services. An even more insane vaccine denier. And with that in mind, one more reason for you not to trust the government. Oh, hey, Paul, I am told now that one of the folks we wanted to interview is available, the Chicago. That would be Rami. We're going to try again. But I would love to hear from you about whether you feel that there will be any way at all that we can recover some sense of balance and fairness, that we can recover some sort of sense of reality when our government tells us a vaccine is safe, a food is safe, an additive is safe, an additive is unsafe. Because what just came out of Washington today was pure lunacy, pure insanity. The FDA is now publicizing some kind of hocus pocus number to the agency's staff. And in this internal review memo, the director of the Food and Drug Administration's vaccine division has just told the staff that at least 10 children, quote, died after and because of receiving, close quote, the COVID vaccine. With no data, with no supporting evidence, nothing, absolutely nothing. It's their imaginary friend doing this experimentation. It's like, they just maybe thought it up somehow. They've decided in their dreams. Did you get a hold of our Chicago musician? Cool. So we're going to talk some more about this. We are absolutely going to talk some more about this. But since we do have, I believe we've connected with Rami Gabriel of Arab Blues.
Yes,
hi.
I'm here.
Welcome to WCPT. Hi. You're on Middle Eastern time. Everything's a little delayed, I know.
And it's a blizzard.
Oh, and it's a blizzard. I know that when I travel there in that part of the world, there's abundant food and a lot of leeway with time.
That's right. I apologize.
That's
but
all right.
I'm here now.
Yeah, you're allowed to bring the food next time. Thank you so much for joining us on WCPT. You teach at Columbia College, and you have this ensemble, and you're coming to Evanston. The group's called Arab Blues. You want to talk a little bit about how it came together, the instruments you use. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. And again, thank you for having me. And yes, we're very excited about our show on December 3rd in Evanston at Nichols Hall. And this is a group that I've had for many years. My name is Rami Gabriel, and I have been in Chicago for 18 years, and I was playing guitar and oud with the great Alfonso Ponticelli at the Green Mill for many years, and incorporating the sounds. Then I had my own Arabic ensemble for many years, and then slowly it built into I had a group called the Arabic Blues Trio and Quartet, and I kept working in this idiom of bringing the Arabic traditional music together with the blues and jazz. And then a great musician moved to Chicago about 5 years ago named Karim Nagy, a great percussionist, and someone told me that he moved, so I gave him a call. And we started playing together about 5 years ago, and we named the group the Arab Blues. And we've had a nice run in the last 5 years. We've toured toured around America. We're going to Canada next week, and we've played around Denmark. And what we've been doing is bringing these traditions together. I play the oud, the buzuk, and the guitar, and Karim plays the rik, the tabla, and his own assembled drum set. And one thing that's unique about my sound is I use an amplifier, and I use effects on these instruments. But we do play from the repertoire, the old repertoire, and then we have original material. So that's sort of a broad overview of what we do.
Who amongst the blues artists made you feel like this music is accessible to the Arab tradition in music? The blues in America, a uniquely American and originating in America form, although a lot of people would say, okay, with African roots, with roots in other cultures, but I think most people would say this is American music. What made you feel like this would mesh well with the Arabic traditions and instruments that are part of your world?
That's a great question. I had the distinct fortune of being a research fellow at the Center for Black Music Research at Columbia College Chicago in 2015, 2016, and I continued doing research there in 2016, 2017, 2018. And what I learned is that this form, the blues, which I had understood to be a Mississippi Delta form with some Chicago, St. Louis, etc. Aspects, does have a very distinct lineage that can be traced to the West African guitar styles. And specifically, there's a book by Gerhard Kubik called Africa and the Blues. And in this book and his whole oeuvre, he details the exactly where it might have come from. And so I initially was drawn to the earliest recordings of blues, Mississippi, John Hurt, but also Blind Boy Jefferson, Blind Boy Fuller, Charlie Patton. And I was really interested in this driving form of blues where the form is not what we think of as the 12-bar blues. It has more of a bardic function, and there's still a lot of recordings of these early things. So I was drawn to this bardic function, this lament function of the blues. And then through this research, I became aware of the Malian tradition, and there are some people who are well known, like Ali Farka Touré, and so this tradition is well known. This is a distinct, so Mali and also parts of Nigeria had a Muslim presence, and through the Muslim presence, certain cultural aspects come along with it. One of them, of course, is the muezzin, which is the call to prayer.
Yes, it's beautiful. Anyone who has traveled in a Muslim country or a country where there's a heavy presence, it's gorgeous. And at such time of day where it's the only thing you hear and everything stops, and it's really very beautiful. I was in Morocco the first time that I experienced that. It's just gorgeous. Let's bring in Karim, who also seems to have come out literally from the cold. Did we catch you in the snow, Karim?
I was stuck in the very big snowstorm here in Chicago, and my car's skidding around. So I skidded right to you right now. But Rami's been giving you great information, so thank you for doing that.
Well, I'm glad we reached both of you because you really do work as a team. And sometimes I gather you have other instrumentalists working with you, and sometimes it's a duo strictly. Is that how you perform?
It's primarily a duo. Sometimes we have guests, but what we've noticed is when it's the two of us, one person delivering melody and the other person delivering rhythm, and then the energy can go in a very free and extemporaneous way, and then we find ways to come back to something very concrete. And people think it's all rehearsed, and people have the impression that everything is rehearsed to the note, but it's really very, very heavily improvised, and just having the two of us makes it very facile in this way.
With a little bit of time, I'm sorry we only have a little bit of time left, but I would like to know if you could tell a story of like a bridge that you built with your music that you were kind of surprised that you found a communion with someone because of this music, this unifying of the African, the American blues, the Middle East, the Arab countries. Have you had one of those moments where someone just kind of went, "Well, you blew my mind," and explain if you would?
I've had my own mind blown. I mean, so if that counts. Basically, we have a note in the Arabic tradition. There's a special scale or what we call a maqam in Arabic, where it's like a collection of 5 to 8 notes that make a certain scale and also deliver a specific feeling as well, dependent on the intervals. We have one that's called Saba, and which literally means breeze from the east in Arabic. It's the opposite of a zephyr, which is the breeze from the west. And the Saba has this note, this fifth note that is a little bit flat, and then you have to jump. The fourth note that is flat, and then you jump all the way higher, and it lives in the same emotional world as the blue note that you find in the American blues pentatonic. And there's a way that they're delivered, the way that they skirt both major and minor to give this in-between kind of very heavy, emotionally potent feeling that both the blues and the Arabic music have. And it's only through this calling them names, calling it blues, calling it maqam, that we make any difference. But actually, the feeling is the same. So this was my aha moment that you're alluding to, when I really felt this continuum between the two musics, all from the note, all from this note that gets bent and it's never fully resolved. And this is the union I felt.
Well, this is going to be our resolution to come and see you live. If not this time, then next time, because you're going on tour. And I want to encourage you, if the music, just the music, or the academic pursuit of the music, or just wanting to be in communion with people who want to hear world music interests you at all, it's December 3rd at Nichols Hall, 8 p.m. showtime. And I want to thank you both for braving the snow to come to us and talk a little bit about your show. If people want to download your new album, where do they get that?
So they can go to our website, thearabblues.com, and then there's a page on the website devoted to our music, thearabblues.com.
V as in T-H-E, that as in
exactly.
Not V. Okay, got it. Got it. And thank you for sending along some music so we could share it with the listeners, and we'll look forward to more of your creations. And thank you for doing the beautiful work that you do. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for the interview.
Thank you. That's Rami Gabriel and Karim Nagy, who are the members of the Arab Blues. You can hear them in Evanston this coming week. It's 2:40. In a moment on the Edwin Eisendrath Show, a woman who was just peacefully leading her own life, and then all of a sudden, politics called her. And she has answered in a way that I think will just knock your socks off. 2:40, Turi Ryder for Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT, where facts matter.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid, on WCPT 820.
2:43, I am Turi Ryder. A reminder, if there is a show or a guest on WCPT that you just want to share with a friend, hear it again, missed part of it, I don't know, someone came to the door offering to shovel your walk and you ran back to the radio and I missed it. You can hear just about every show, your favorite shows. You can hear Stephanie Miller. You can hear Patty Vasquez. You can hear Richard Chu. We're all on the heartlandsignal.com podcast page, and most likely also on your favorite podcast platform. Here's a story. I was really excited when producer Hillary Rubin told me about this woman. I had to meet her. You're going to meet her same time, same station. Her name's Monica Shapiro. And this is her second career as an elected official. I can let her tell the story, but the short version about Monica is that she was working on this project in Michigan to improve infrastructure for cyclists and pedestrians and people with disabilities on Grand Blanc's primary roads. And they raised some money and they got some grants, and the township just kind of ignored this effort. And she thought, as the Wicked Witch of the West would say, we'll see about that. And so I'll let her pick it up from there. Monica Shapiro, welcome to WCPT, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Thank you for spending some Thanksgiving weekend time with us.
Thank you. Thank you for talking to me.
Well, so you're out there, you're getting money, you're getting interest in your town, and you're going to provide this.
Yes. In fact, the supervisor at the time had said to me, if you could get like 60 people in a room to say they want this, I would listen. So we put up flyers around the town and we said, this is the master plan. We've got this grid of primary roads and we should be able to cycle and walk on them. People have said since 1996 that they wanted to be able to use them with their bikes and their cars because it's not a very big town and it's not a very hilly town. And we have big, wide shoulders. It all works. But anyway, so I got 60 people in a room. A big crowd of people came to this meeting, and he was there. So then he turns right around and says, well, you think Monica thinks there's a big pile of money out there, but there's not. And then come the next 8 years had $57 million worth of investment on our primary roads in a period of time when legislation was all encouraging and incorporating active transportation into infrastructure, and it was just extremely frustrating year in, year out. I'd say, here comes another big job. Let's make bike lanes. If we're widening the road, let's widen it enough to include bike lanes. Let's do this. Let's do that. And this would cost this amount, and here's funding. And never, ever, ever would they listen because it wasn't their thing. It wasn't what they were into.
Let me just pause you for a second. If people don't know where Grand Blanc is, can you explain a little bit? You're in Michigan, not too far from us, right?
We're a suburb of Flint.
There you go.
We're near Flint.
Days drive away. And by the way, this model that you're talking about is something that's been tried in some Chicago suburbs too. We want more accessible roadways for bikes and pedestrians. So it
shouldn't be all cars.
Yeah, and
not in this century.
So you are doing what so many people want to do, and you're meeting. It's almost like one of those folk fairy tales where they say, well, bring us the gold ring. Well, bring us the special sweater.
They keep moving the goalpost.
Yeah, bring us the broom of the Wicked Witch of the West. You keep showing up with everything they say that they want, and they keep going.
And they still say no.
Right. So what did you do?
It got very frustrating, and I said, you know what? And at the road commission level, at MDOT level, they'd say, well, the township, they were happy to sit on their heels and say, look, the town, I'm sorry, but you can't request this. The township has to request.
So what did you do?
Okay, I'll be the township.
There you go.
Run.
You have to. It's like that poster. You have to be the change you want to see. So what did you do?
Exactly. So I ran. At the age 67, I got myself. I got a logo and I made a website and started going door to door because we're 40,000 people. And everybody said the main thing you can do is knock on a lot of doors. And I said, well, I've got energy. I'll go knock on doors. And people did like me, 11,000 of the 23,000 voters voted for me, but it wasn't quite enough. So
Close.
When you said elected official, I'm not one.
Okay.
I never did get elected. So we had the one election, and it was 11,000 to 12,000.
Okay.
And it was disheartening, but still a lot of people responded to me, and there was. But the township, actually at the same time, the same year as the election, they ran a survey. They spent $150,000 on a special survey.
Oh, boy.
And 300 people responded to that survey and told them that they were really pleased with the direction the township was going in. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, wait a second. 11,000 people aren't too pleased with how, isn't that a survey? Doesn't the election count? But it didn't matter, no, it didn't. And we had the survey, and they're very happy, and they're going along in their way. And a person that I ran with and I were just, here's the thing. There is very little local media anymore. There's the newspapers have dried up. The TV stations, as you know, even the radio stations sometimes are hurting, and people aren't paying attention, or there's not as much as there used to be.
Or with these little stations, they're there, but they're running syndicated programming because it's cheaper.
Yes.
And the guys who own these stations, and it's usually guys, sit there at the Chamber of Commerce, and it's the same old buddies that they see on the golf course, and they see them at the club, and they see them, and they just convince each other.
Investigative journalism. No. Yes, they convince each other that they're doing the job.
That's right. So, I should back up a little. We came to you a little late because we wanted to talk with Arab Blues, and they'd gotten stuck in the snow. But one of the reasons I wanted to have you on WCPT today is to show people that you can do this at any age, at any point, and in the face of all kinds of obstacles. So let's skip forward a little bit. They're all telling you, now, little girl, go away. You lost the election.
Go away.
Right.
Yes,
and so your next big move is what?
Start a podcast with my friend who ran with me. And because over the course of the election, we were going on and on. You know, this is happening, that's happening. We can't get to enough doors to tell people how it's run, how badly it's run, what the problems are. Because the more I ran, the more I talked to people, the more involved I got, the more meetings I watched, all of it, the more I thought, boy, you know, this isn't being done properly. This is actually, it's not just that they're not listening to me about bike lanes. They're not listening to a lot of people about a lot of things. They're focused on something that we don't particularly care about, the general people. You know, they're not really responding to the residents. They're about who knows what.
You're making me want to sing "Power to the People" right on. I'm like in my head. I'm going "Power to the People" right on.
Well, you know, we would say to ourselves, we are speaking truth to power in the podcast. Now, I will say the podcast has a very small listenership, and it's very slow because I do the editing, I do everything. Our production values aren't the greatest.
Who cares?
But it's a pretty good show.
Yeah.
We're fun, we're funny, we're smart, we know things, and it got under their skin quite a bit.
So then what happened?
So the next thing, the very one major thing that happened was we had a terrible tragedy in Grand Blanc Township. We had a Church of Latter-day Saints, 4 people, you know, a guy drove into it, caused a fire, shot a bunch of people. Yes. It was a terrible, terrible thing. Nothing like that had ever happened in our small town, but it does happen. You know, there's mental health crisis across the country. There's lots of people are hurting, and things like this are happening.
A lot of people noted in particular, and to your town's credit, that the folks in the town said, we need to support the family of this troubled man who did this awful thing. And that one hit people in the metaphorical face. Like, look at this, in the face of all of this.
We're not just saying he's an evil guy. We're saying he's a troubled guy.
And we're going to help the family. And just to digress for a moment, let's juxtapose that with President Trump saying we're not only going to condemn the guy who did this alleged shooting of our National Guard, we're going to deport his whole darn family. Just for a second, hold those two approaches and ask yourself, what kind of country do you want to live in? Do you want to live in the country that says you've got a troubled individual who's going to certainly get, allegedly, if this is what he did, some sort of punishment, and a family that is obviously going to be ripped apart? And do we support them, or do we just throw them right into the same cell as the perpetrator of this horrific act? And your town did exactly what I would have hoped in my best angelic self would happen, where they said, you know what, we're going to band together and do the right thing for this poor suffering family.
Partly the Latter-day Saints themselves.
They're good people.
The church that they are.
Not good people.
But
so,
that brings up a point that I made throughout the campaign, because I got, it was a polarizing campaign, obviously. It was the Trump-Kamala Harris the same year. And everybody was polarized. But I was walking up. I was a Democratic candidate, but I always said at the local level, the things that are polarizing us nationally don't have to do that at the local level. At the local level, we pull together for our community, and people that are in aren't necessarily the best people. And it doesn't. And so I had as many Trump supporter people cross the aisle and be supportive of me because they heard my message. I had a married couple at a house where they said, he's for Trump, I'm for Kamala, but we're both for you.
We're both for you. By the way, if you're just joining us, we're talking to Monica Shapiro of Michigan, her small town in Michigan, how she got activated, how she became a force for change and good. And it all started out with some bike lanes. And then there was the tragedy of the Latter-day Saints fire and shooting. And she ran for, what did you run for this time now? Hello? Oh, have we lost you? Oh, dear. We'll get her back. This is the weather we're in, the snowstorm. We'll get Monica back again and talk to her some more because you want to know what happened to her next. It was pretty amazing. She ran up against some very, very archaic rules about fires. Oh, we got you back. Monica, welcome back. Thanks for being there. Let's talk a little bit about the fire situation in this church and what had been said and what was the reality.
Go back because a whole big thing happened with our connection.
Okay. So in the course of this event with the fire in the Latter-day Saints house of worship, you ran up against some things that had been said about fire safety. Could you talk about that?
Here's the deal with that. I will tell you that we in our town we have a part-time and full-time firefighters, and by all accounts there was we were low on staffing as we grew as a township. There's a whole history to it that's kind of a mess where we split with another community's fire department, and that was probably ill-advised and had to do with all kinds of reasons that I ran. But at the beginning, we were all kind of reeling. We had hired a new fire chief in April, 6 months on. His name is Jamie Gent. He was a great guy. He'd unified the fire department. They were all excited. They were feeling revitalized. And he had come on saying, you've got a staffing problem, and that's going to be my main focus is getting the staffing to where it should be.
Okay.
6 months later, we had the church fire, and all of a sudden an announcement is made that the chief has been put on administrative leave.
Why? Yeah.
Because, he was a big hero on the day by all accounts because he kept pushing for more staffing, and they were tired of it.
Okay, so for agitating to make his department better, to make them more efficient, to staff them fully, for speaking truth to the town council, they sacked him, essentially.
They tried to.
All right. Well, then what happened? And by the way, Monica, if you can spare a few minutes after the news, we may keep you on if you're available. Would you be?
Yes. How much more time do I have to spit this out?
We're going to hit the news in a minute or two, but then you're going to come right back after we check in on the national news. So don't you worry.
All right. So I'll quickly say that everybody got wind of it. All through the town. And I had a friend who had been talking to me about, I had made a mistake in a podcast. He had talked to me about firefighter issues. He's a nice guy, and we had been talking for a long time, back channeling. So I got the scoop right away that this is why. It was a little bit of union busting involved. He had refused to reprimand his union chief who had wanted to talk to the board about these issues. He said that would be a violation of workers' whatever, the rules. And so anyway, there was a huge uproar. It was on the agenda. They had thought stupidly that they could quietly do this, place him on administrative leave, then ask the board to vote on termination. It was on the agenda. Well, a big uproar. The superintendent is not an elected. The supervisor takes it off the agenda. So there's a huge meeting. The whole town comes out. Everybody wants to talk about, don't fire Chief Gent. He's a hero. This is crazy. What are you doing?
Okay, let's leave it there till we're done with the news. Now you got a cliffhanger. Is the chief going to keep his job? Monica, stand by. We're going to catch up with the news. This is the Edwin Eisendrath Show. In a moment, Monica Shapiro on her fight for safety in her small town in Michigan and how she outdid the big boys on an Edwin Eisendrath Show on WCPT.
Not yet. All right.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
2 minutes after 3 o'clock, I am Turi Ryder, usually here on Sundays at 2 o'clock, but happy to give Edwin Eisendrath the day off. Thanks to Paul at the controls here and all of you for spending part of your Thanksgiving weekend with me. You make my snowstorm better. Still, and coming up this hour, I should also mention in just a few minutes, the former executive director of the Minnesota Republican Party who saw the light, hallelujah, and became a Democrat for all kinds of reasons, and wrote one of the funniest pieces recently about the tragedy of the Trump administration that I've read. And so, although he's now the head of Democrats abroad, because he and his husband have retired to a wonderful home in South America, where they welcome immigrants, I'd like to point out. He's still very active with the Democratic Party and will speak, who, by the way, can vote. Yeah, you can vote, even if you don't live here, if you're American. So we'll talk to him later on in the hour. But we asked Monica Shapiro to hang on because her second career just sort of accidentally became troublemaking politician. And where we left our heroine from Grand Blanc, Michigan, the town that had that tragic fire and shooting at the LDS church, where the very troubled person, I don't know if he's been convicted, so we'll just have to say allegedly.
He's dead.
Did they? Forgive me. I can't keep. This is the awful part. We have so many of these. I can't even keep track.
Which one was it?
Which one?
He didn't get arrested. Poor fellow. It was death by, suicide by
death
cop.
By cop, right. Okay, thank you for filling me. I'm also very much thinking of the person who's hospitalized now in D.C. It's all one awful ball of tragedy. But from an unwillingness to simply listen to the people of her town and put in some darn bike paths to the sack or the suspension of the fire chief who said, we need more people. Monica became more and more and more active. So now where we left this before the news, they have put the fire chief who said, we need to whip this department into shape by funding it better and hiring more people. The town has put him on administrative leave. And now what? And you've started a podcast to point out all the ways that the town is not functioning as it should. And now what happens?
Well, there's this giant meeting. They had taken it off the agenda. So now everyone, all we could do was speak at public comment 3 minutes and not be, that was it. They cut us off, including Chief Gent. So Chief Gent gets up. There's throngs of people. We put a giant big banner. Our podcast is called Grand Blanc Watchdogs, and we've got this watchdog logo, and I put the big banner up in the back of the room so they would know that the watchdogs were there. And so he goes up
and how many people are on the town council facing all of y'all, as they say in Kansas where I'm from?
8, I think.
Okay.
And the superintendent, who is not an elected official. He's not an elected official, and he gets paid $200,000 a year, which is pretty outrageous.
That's a lot.
That position.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
So nine people on the dais, and about how many of you are in the audience waiting for your 3 minutes?
Well, there's 2 giant audiences. There's probably like 60, 70 people in one room, and then outside there's an overflow room, and they're watching it on a screen.
How many
outside.
There? About how many there?
Probably another 50.
Okay.
It was at least 100 people were there,
okay,
which is a lot.
That is.
In a small, and so everybody's, a couple of people spoke, and then Chief Gent gets up. He only gets 3 minutes to defend himself. So he stands up and he looks around the room and he says, "Happy First Responders Day, everybody," because it was First Responders Day. Literally. It was 1 month after the fire, and it happens to be National First Responders Day. These people are so clueless and tone deaf about their own community that they had arranged to have this guy fight for his job on First Responders Day.
Nice. Thoughtful.
Ironic and gorgeous and kind of hilarious.
Yep,
and
all of that.
Keeping with how foolish they are.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets up and he makes a great speech. And just as he's rounding the bend to start talking about, you as far as the budget goes, you say you've increased our, the supervisor cuts him off because his 3 minutes are up. We can't extend that for this guy.
Can you
his 3
yield?
minutes are up.
Can you
Cut
yield?
him off.
Can you yield your 3 minutes? Can someone yield their 3 minutes to him the way they do in Congress? No.
I mean, maybe they could, but not in this town and not that day because they wanted him gone.
Okay.
Because the whole room was so overflowing with people. Now, let me just back up to tell you that surrounding communities had special days, special meetings, giving plaques to their firefighters who had contributed to the effort. We had not had that. There had been no celebration of our fire chief who had done this, who had heroically served through this thing. We had no celebration. So him fighting for his job on First Responders Day is our only chance. So when he sits down, the applause breaks out. And at first it's almost tentative, and then it gets louder, and everybody's standing up, and it felt so good to clap for this man, this beleaguered man. And what is the supervisor doing? He's pounding his gavel in the front of the room.
Oh,
and he's saying,
they love that. They love that gavel. They love it, that gavel. They're just, anytime the public raises its voice, they whack that gavel. I still remember, I think it was Marjorie Taylor Greene back in her early days demanding, people being respectful. She, the ultimate disrespecter.
Respectful.
Yeah.
I mean, and his wife, he's got this wife, I call her Lady Macbeth. She jumps to her feet in the front row and she turns and she's, scolding the audience for daring to keep going because it became a standing ovation. It got louder. And, the gavel's going, and it's like he could, a better guy, a guy that really cared about the community could have just, first of all, said to his superintendent who works for the board, no, we can't possibly put this guy on administrative leave. Work out your differences. Go back to the drawing table. That's what he should have done. And at the moment when the whole crowd is applauding him, he should have jumped to his feet and said, I too applaud you, Chief Gent. You're a great man. You did a great thing. We're a grieving community. I'm with my people. We all support you. No. Pound the gavel. And later on, there was another person who spoke, a great little podcaster who has, she's got a TikTok thing. She's way, way more popular than us. She's got 30,000 viewers, and she's really something. And she got into this thing. She got into it. She started to report on it. She's from the neighboring town over, but she thought it was really hard.
Okay, so now let's find out what happens. Now the town.
So what happens?
Wait. Yeah. So the town council should be humiliated by their tone deafness and the fact that the public is obviously against them. So what does happen?
They end the meeting. We can't comment on all this, and then it's over, and everybody goes home, and then it gets quietly announced. It had already been announced that he was reinstated, but he wasn't really. He wasn't really reinstated at that point. There was nothing in writing. He hadn't accepted. What they did was they put him back. They took him back. They realized they couldn't in the face of this community thing, they just couldn't fire him like they might have wanted to. They had to reinstate him. They did reinstate him. But to stop the ego of the guy that was the superintendent, they put him on 3 additional months of employee probation.
Oh, for Pete's sakes. So now let's talk about your political career. So you won this one. You've got the podcast. You came close to winning a seat on the council. You've organized the watchdogs for your podcast and your neighborhood activism. What happens to you? I'm retired. I'm just peacefully going to enjoy my life here. Where does this leave you being the change you want to be? Because this is inspiring, I think, for a lot of us. What's next for you, Monica Shapiro?
Well, so many people were talking about we should recall these guys. We have to recall. And, I knew I had looked into what a recall involves. And in Michigan, it's political. And so a close election is almost grounds enough for a recall in Michigan, but you have to wait a year and blah, blah, blah. So I knew it, and I knew it just has to be clear. It has to be factual. I had been talking to some lawyers, like what would grounds be. So I wrote the grounds.
Oh.
I figured out what grounds could be.
And who are you going to recall? The superintendent? All of them. The
superintendent and everybody on the board that could be recalled. Okay. I want to recall.
Okay, wait. Let's just take a moment to appreciate this. You are so incensed that you decide you are going to recall, with your efforts and the efforts of the people you've organized, the entire town council and administrative staff of Crown Blanc, Michigan. You're going to do this thing.
Stupid, yeah.
Yes.
It is a little quixotic. I may not have a shot. I know it's crazy. And I'm not, you can't single-handedly do this, although you can. One person can write the language and submit it. And I filed against everybody except one guy who hasn't been on you have to have been on at least 1 year. So I submitted all the petitions and and then I got out of town. I did it Friday the 20th, and then I left town because I'm in Florida for Thanksgiving. I'm missing your snowstorm.
Oh, lucky you.
And so anyway, I submitted it, and the next thing I know, it's all over the news that people had filed for recall. I had filed for recall, and of course, people are saying she's just disappointed, and she's a sore loser, and she's this and she's that, and it rolls off my back because really, what I wanted to do was show people. We have this power. Lucky us. Not all states have it, but in Michigan we do. And it's considered almost impossible because you need 6,000 signatures to get it on the ballot.
How's that going?
And it's going to be January.
Okay.
And it's hopeless, probably. Probably this isn't going to happen. But I will say that a lot of people are very excited and hoping that we can do it. And having gotten 11,000 votes, perhaps 11,000 people were dissatisfied enough with these guys that they will come out and file the 6,000 signatures, and we will get it on the ballot. And wouldn't that be something?
All you need is a little more than half the people who voted for you to sign the recall petition.
Right, and 6,000 is actually a little more than I probably need. It's based on some numbers, but yeah.
I have to say, I keep wanting to quote to you. I used to be an adult literacy tutor, the Laubach method, and their slogan was each one, teach one. And in your case, it's each one, reach one. If each person who voted for you signs the petition and has one other person sign the petition, wouldn't it be interesting if these guys finally had to say, we don't get to sit on this town council by some kind of magical power. We don't sit here because we are better than everybody else. We don't get to ignore the public and hang out at our country club and swing our golf clubs and our other bodily parts around as though we run the joint. We have to be responsible to the people who live here. And if you teach them that lesson, you're coming right back on my show to talk about how that feels. I really am.
It would be amazing and exciting, and it would be so good for the town. But of course, speaking of, my husband is always saying, we have a nice life. Why are you doing this? Just stay home with us.
Does he really?
Nice kids yes, because it is nice. We do have a nice life.
At Thanksgiving,
we have very wonderful children.
At Thanksgiving, I'll bet you he's secretly proud. I'll bet you his heart is like those Macy's Thanksgiving Day balloons just floating above the crowd with pride in your work and your efforts and the fact that when you are motivated to be that change and you put the work in and you make it happen, not only is it your particular township and your particular issue and your particular effort that is significant, it's an inspiration to other people, especially in these dark times where we're just looking at the erosion of science and facts. And yes, it's got to be inspiring. I got to ask you, what was your Thanksgiving meal like? Did it come up?
It came up a little because I had a television station had local station had Zoomed with me, so we talked about it a little bit. But really, my kids said, "Mom, if this doesn't work, you have to give up. You have to let go."
And what did you say?
And I said, "Well, you're probably right. I should. It's going to be really hard, though, because I won't give, we'll still do the podcast because we just love to keep needling them.
Good.
And keep making, we want to, we laugh at them, and they're not used to that. They're very solemn and serious about what,
and full of themselves. I'll give you my standard answer when people say, well, obviously the logic dictates. And I look at people, or I talk to them here on this radio station, and you say to them, we'll see about that.
We'll see about that.
We'll see about that.
That's what I've been saying to them all along.
There you go. Monica Shapiro, thank you so much for giving of your Thanksgiving weekend to us. I think it really is inspiring in this time to hear your story, and I'll look forward to speaking with you again in the not-too-distant future. Keep us posted. Thanks a lot.
Right.
It's 18 minutes after 3 o'clock. I'm Turi Ryder. In a moment, the trajectory of a guy who used to run the Republican Party in Minnesota, and now, oh my gosh, I'm actually going to read you a piece that he wrote that is beyond hilarious. When I read this on his social media, I got in touch with him right away and said, you've got to talk about what you're putting out there on social media. You've got to talk about the path of the ex-Republican. It will move people to hysterics. And I think it will move you to, at the very least, a little private chortle as you spend time with the radio show or the podcast today, Thanksgiving weekend. We are WCPT, where facts matter.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid, on WCPT 820.
20 minutes after 3 o'clock, I'm Turi. At this side of the microphone, you are on that side of the radio. But if there's a part of this show or any other WCPT show that you want to hear again, you should know that going to heartlandsignal.com lets you do that. Likewise, just about any host you have on this radio station, Joan Esposito, Richard Chu, Patty, we are all available in podcast form on almost any podcast platform you would want to find. And also, since many of us are talking with local politicians who are about to be running, the interviewing season has begun, and you can hear interviews with political candidates, get an idea of where they stand on the issues you care about. Check it all out on heartlandsignal.com. My show is usually tomorrow at 2 o'clock, and I hope you'll join me then. I am Turi with a U, Ryder like the truck. You can find me on all the socials. Just spell the name right. Put in Turi Ryder Podcast. That's my podcast. And yes, that's my book from Chicago's wonderful Tortoise Books. Thank you. And you can reach out to me directly even when I'm not on the air via social media. I typically am open and happy to respond and spend time with you virtually off the air. Joining us, Mike Triggs. I first ran into Mike when I was on the air in the Twin Cities, and he was still struggling to direct the Republican Party of Minnesota. Isn't that right, Mike?
It sure is. It was a big struggle.
Well, the party was, you wrote a really great book about it called You Can't Make This Bleep Up. That is the book. You can find it. His last name is spelled Triggs. And his book is available. You can find it on Amazon. And it's the story of a disaffected and formerly loyal Republican who just basically, you sort of found the opportunities for you to be part of your party getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Would that be an accurate way to phrase it?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was the executive director of the Republican Party, I met you on when you were hosting an afternoon show on KSTP radio in St. Paul, and you were always my favorite host, and you just drove the state Republican chairman crazy. And when he found out that I was on the air with you, he came into my office and he was telling me to put the phone down, and it was pretty funny. But yeah,
he turned it into like a Rumpelstiltskin. He basically pounded himself right through the floor, if I recall correctly.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
And what was interesting to me when I first started talking to you, because I still do have friends who are old school Republican, and we all in those days wanted our government to do the same basic things. We just disagreed about how best to do it. But what I've noticed, and I think your writing supports this, is we now want completely different things from our government. The people in the Trump train and the people who are not. Would you say that's accurate?
That's certainly accurate. The party that I joined was essentially the Eisenhower Republicans, and their platform was really pretty similar to the Democrats' platform today. And somewhere along the line, I guess maybe in the 1980s, either in the Reagan administration or shortly after George Bush, it started to really change. And the Minnesota Republican Party was always a very liberal Republican bastion. And when I became the executive director, it was interesting. We had a state convention, and there was a Presbyterian minister that was giving a prayer. And during the prayer, he made the statement that just as the government should not be in your bedroom, it should also not be in the womb. And there was almost a riot that took place on the convention floor.
Wow.
And we had people storming the stage, and the state chairman told a deputy sheriff that he needed to remove the pastor mid-prayer, and the pastor says, "I'm not finished," and he says, "Yes, you are." Well, the whole thing was caught on microphone by Minnesota Public Radio, and so it went out all over the United States. And
yes.
And we got a pile of letters that came in the mail the next day, and people were just horrified. And it was primarily from our major donors that said, this is the last dime that you're ever going to see from me, because this was just totally uncalled for. Wait,
were they mad at the pastor, or were they mad that people wanted to remove him mid-prayer?
Remove him mid-prayer, because most of these big donors that were writing to us in opposition to what had happened were the ones that were writing the big checks, and they tended to be pro-life Republicans and tended to be pretty moderate Arnie Carlson supporters. And
wait, you just said they were pro-life Republicans who were writing the big checks.
No, I meant pro-choice Republicans.
Okay, all right, okay. So, yes, continue.
And I said, well, we've got this whole stack of letters, and we need to respond to these, because these are our major donors, and this is where our money comes from. And the state chairman said, you can just F them and throw them in the wastebasket.
Oh, boy.
I made the mistake of, I knew where my bread was buttered, and so I responded to the letters. And as a result, I ended up losing my job.
Well, for the good, in my opinion, I'm sorry to say. I mean, sometimes it's like childbirth. The baby doesn't want to come out. You have to force that baby out, and then it lives its life, healthy, strong, thriving. You needed to get out of that womb of the Republican Party, if you don't mind my saying so, Mike.
Yeah. And so then I went to work for Arnie Carlson, managing his reelection campaign, and that's kind of where my book picks up. And,
that's the former governor of Minnesota, for those of us who listen from elsewhere, yes.
Right. And Arnie was probably the worst politician I have ever met in terms of being a people person. But he was the best when it came to public policy.
You know, we have that on the Democratic side. I would posit that Hillary Clinton was not a great politician, but that she would have been an excellent president. I think sometimes the two skills are discrete, and you really cannot get them into the same person comfortably. And it's been to the detriment of the body politic as a whole, that the candidates and the functioning politicians are not necessarily using the same qualities. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, and anyway, Arnie immediately, within a day of being fired, I immediately got a call from the governor's office saying they wanted me to come and run their reelection campaign. Mm-hmm. So I'd done a great job at the state party, and so I really didn't miss a slurp from the trough, Republican trough. I just went from one office to the other.
Nice.
But immediately, because Arnie was a pro-choice Republican, he had just signed an Employment Non-Discrimination Act for gays and lesbians, and had been a pretty liberal governor up until that point. He immediately had a primary opponent, and this primary opponent was like a Trump wannabe. Way before, this was back in 1994, and so he'd never heard of Donald Trump, except for maybe being a real estate guy in New York, and at that time Trump was a Democrat. But anyway, he ended up challenging the governor for the nomination, and I don't know whether you want me to tell the story or not, but
I love your stories. You tell your story, and then I'm going to read your post. So go ahead, tell the story.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, anyways, one day I was at the governor's mansion for a meeting, and I came in the office afterwards, and there was a Dane Smith from the Star Tribune was in my office.
That is their version of the Chicago Tribune. That's paper of record, right?
That is absolutely in Minneapolis. And anyway, he was in the office, and he said, "Mike," he said, your opponent has got this list of that he's been circulating to the press, and we think it's sleazy, and we're not going to use it, but just in case WCCO uses it or the Pioneer Press, we're going to have to use the story, and so we want a quote from you." And I said, "Well, I don't know what you're talking about." And he hands me this piece of paper, and on the piece of paper is a list of 25 gays and lesbians that are close to the governor.
Ooh.
And
let me see. Whose name would have been on that list, Mike?
And my name is number one on the list.
Were you out at the time? Were you an out?
I was not. If you remember right, I was about as good of a Mormon boy as you could get, and a 39-year-old virgin. And I've always been just married to my job and totally focused on my work, and so I was really shocked to see my name, but also three people from my staff, and there were businessmen, a nominee for the Supreme Court, and I think the dean of the law school, and doctors, and I was just shocked. And,
a whole bunch of guys you would have maybe liked to date, actually. Sounds interesting.
Well,
yeah. Teasing. I'm teasing you. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, I flipped. I told the reporter to get the hell out of my office. They said I had nothing to say to him, and immediately went back and flipped through my Rolodex. We had Rolodexes.
I still have one, but yeah, I know. That's for the wait, let me just explain for the digital age. Before there was a database, there was like a little rolling card file called a Rolodex where you wrote stuff on the card and you stuck it in the thing, and that's how you looked stuff up. Go ahead.
And I don't know why I had kept this guy's business card in my Rolodex, but I did. And so I gave him a call, and I said that I just saw this list that he was distributing, and I wanted him to know that if it shows up in press, that he's going to be immediately have a lawsuit on his hand. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, Mike, everybody knows you're a snappy dresser.
Oh, my goodness. And that was his reasoning, a snappy dresser.
Well, it gets better. He said, you're a snappy dresser, and you always wear bow ties, and your shoes are always shined, and I've heard that you pay $50 for haircuts. And
I don't even have words. I have to say, I will say this, as the mother of a gay kid, young adult, I will say that he's a little more clothes conscious than the not gay kid, but I certainly wouldn't read anything into that necessarily.
And, well, anyway, I said, well, if that's the criteria for being gay, I guess I'm guilty on all counts. And he said, plus, I've heard that you do needlepoint. And I just lost it. I said, so does Rosie Greer. And Rosie Greer was a famous football player. And I told him, I said, when I go home at night, I have to totally focus on something that is not politics. And so I do needlepoint. And I said, in fact, I've won blue ribbons in 2 state fairs. And I just couldn't believe it.
It sounds just like an out-of-body experience. I mean, you're just living your life, and all of a sudden here's somebody gathering up all these factoids and putting them together and interpreting this as to what you do with your private body and your private hours with your private choices. It's just bizarro.
Right. And I said, when at 9 o'clock at night, when most men or 10 o'clock at night, when most men are at home in bed with their wife or somebody else's wife, I'm still at the campaign headquarters. And I says, working to make sure that when the day after the election, your kids are embarrassed to go to school because you've lost by such a big margin. And anyway, I ended up hanging up on him, and for the next 3 weeks, the list kept getting passed around Republican and Democratic circles. Everybody was talking about it. The press kept assuring me that they weren't going to use it, that it's sleazy. But I was waking up every morning just in dreading to see the paper on the step, what was going to come of the story. And 3 weeks after the governor's campaign chairman came to the office, and he said, Mike, you've kind of become a distraction for the campaign.
Oh, God.
And we think that you need to lay on your sword or fall on your sword and leave the campaign. And being the good soldier that I was, I've tendered my resignation, and the next morning I wake up and I find out there's a story about my leaving the campaign in the newspaper, and it said that Mike Triggs has left the Carlson campaign for health reasons.
Oh, for goodness sakes.
And it's 1994, and everyone assumes
that you had HIV.
Right, right. And so I was never able to ever find a job again in Republican politics. I was just not wanted. And so I ended up I ended up taking a job at Nordstrom, and I ended up having like a 30-year career in high-end retail.
I would bring anybody to you at Nordstrom for the best customer service because you certainly know what you're doing. I want to pause you there in your story because you are now happily married.
Yes,
and a dog parent, and residing in, remind me, which country?
Ecuador. In a city high in the Andes called Cuenca.
With your husband. And so in this case, all's well that ends well. You're the head of Democrats Abroad, and you have been posting, and I encourage everyone to follow Mike Triggs on his Facebook page because the Trump administration has provided him with such excellent fodder for his wit. I tell you, why don't we take a couple of moments, and then if you can hang on with us, Mike, I'm going to read the column that made me get a hold of you. We haven't talked lately, but not since your book came out. And by the way, the book again is called "You Can't Make This Bleep Up" by Mike Triggs, and he is a source, a fountain of cynical, hilarious, anti-Trump ammunition. So I completely encourage you to follow him and read his stuff. And I'm going to read this absolutely fabulous posting that he put up about Pam Bondi and, was it Lindsay Halligan? Is that her first name, Lindsay? Lindsay Halligan, and the whole fracas that unfolded last week in front of a district court, a federal judge, concerning James Comey, former head of the FBI. So that's all coming up in just moments. I'm Turi Ryder for Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid, on WCPT 820.
20 minutes before 4 o'clock, I am Turi with a U, T-U-R-I, and Ryder, like those rental trucks you see all over the roadway. Well, maybe not today because it's so snowy and so drifty and so blizzardy. Just go look for a Ryder truck some other day and look for this podcast, this live show in podcast form all over the place and on the heartlandsignal.com website. In fact, any show that you hear here on WCPT, you can hear again, share with a friend, send a link, enjoy it twice. Pick your favorite part and share it. And we appreciate when you do that. We love it. Our advertisers love it. I'll be here tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Following this show today, the Edwin Eisendrath Show, with me filling in for Edwin, is Ricky Hendon, his show, also following this Thanksgiving weekend. And I hope that you are staying warm and keeping your sidewalk shoveled safely. Let's not get out there and slip around too much. And if you can cuddle up with your family, if they're staying, light a fire, hold the dog, have some tea, enjoy your weekend. We really appreciate that you are sharing some of that time with us. Still with me, Mike Triggs, former head of the Minnesota Republican Party, now loyal, out proud Democrat, and chair of it's called the Democrats Abroad. Is that the group, Mike Triggs, that you are in charge of now?
It's called Democrats Abroad, and there's a Democrat organization around the world.
We're having a little trouble with your connection. We may have to try to reconnect with you. Would that be a good idea, you think?
That'd be fun.
Okay, we're gonna disconnect and reconnect because when you're on those satellite connections from Ecuador, it can be a little bit chancy. So Paul will do that for us. I do want to share with you while we're reconnecting with Mike, the thing that made me pick up my mouse and click on his name and say, would you please come and give us an update on how you see the current political situation? Mike posts, as mentioned, some truly terrific stuff on his social media. And this was his analysis of the ruling that was the ruling that was supposed to produce indictments for James Comey and Letitia James and result in their prosecution, their revenge prosecution at the behest of Donald Trump. And this is Triggs's post.
No, that sounds better.
I guess here you can just put him on hold so he can hear his own words as read by me, and he's going to love it. Triggs, can you hear me okay? I'm going to give it.
I can hear you.
Great.
I can hear you fine.
Going to give you a dramatic rendering of this brilliant piece you wrote. So just
okay,
know, I know
great.
you've waited all your life to hear my dulcet tones reading your post. I guess this is what happens when you hire attorneys on the their looks and not, I think you meant basis, on the basis of their looks and not about their competence. Trump's legal clown show implodes as former White House lawyer calls for Bondi and Halligan to be disbarred after botched Comey indictment. In an explosive interview, former Trump White House attorney Ty Cobb just detonated a political IED under U.S. Attorney and former beauty queen Lindsay Halligan and Attorney General Pam Bondi, calling their botched, quote, indictment, close quote, of former FBI Director James Comey, quote, the height of ineptitude and misconduct, close quote. And coming from a guy who worked inside the Trump White House, that's basically the legal version of a 4-alarm fire. Cobb, with the fury of a man who's seen one too many press conferences from Rudy Giuliani, did not hold back. You couldn't find a high school stock boy at Home Depot who could have handled this move more ineptly than Lindsay Halligan did, he said. A line so devastating it deserves its own Pulitzer, or Pulitzer, depending on how you say that. Why? Because Halligan apparently took an indictment that the grand jury never actually saw, slapped the foreman's signature on it, and marched it to a judge like she had just uncovered Watergate. Let's be clear. That's not a technical error. That's basic level, day one, Criminal Procedure 101 malpractice. Cobb broke it down like he was explaining crayons to toddlers. A grand jury needs 12 members to return an indictment. Halligan used 2. Therefore, the indictment isn't just flawed, it does not exist. Not metaphorically, not figuratively. Legally, it does not exist. Cobb called the case, quote, dead, close quote, shredded Bondi for twice vouching for the sham process, and made it clear the Trump DOJ is now running on pure fumes, fantasy, and Fox News talking points. Then he dropped the hammer. I do think that both Halligan and Bondi should be disbarred. When Trump's own former lawyer calls for your law license to be revoked because your prosecution was so corrupt or incompetent that it doesn't meet the minimum standard of high school shop class, it's time to pack up your office plants and go home. But instead of shame, the Trump administration is reportedly doubling down. Because nothing says law and order like illegally fabricating indictments while screaming witch hunt at everyone else. This is what happens when you replace seasoned federal prosecutors with bargain basement MAGA influencers whose primary courtroom experience is yelling in YouTube videos. And it leaves one unavoidable truth. The Trump DOJ isn't just weaponized, it's dangerously incompetent. And the only real threat it poses is to the rule of law. You wrote that on the 20th. Yeah, Congratulations. I think I'm going to just... This is my applause. I loved it. And by the way, we've been pulling apart the latest legal indignities on my show pretty much every week. Last week, we had our favorite regular constitutional law expert, David Levine from the University of California at San Francisco Law School on to talk about this exact thing. But I think you put it really, really well. What you're watching from your home far away is the implosion of anything remotely resembling a justice system. How do you feel when you're watching from there, from Ecuador, what's going on here? Do you feel frustrated that you can't get out there and organize more people? How many people are part of the Democrats overseas?
There's thousands of them overseas. We've got just a little over 1,000 here in Ecuador, but we are constantly registering voters. They're making sure that they're actually registered in their home states, but we make sure that they get an absentee ballot request in, so they'll have a primary ballot or a general election ballot emailed to them, and they can send it back to their home state.
Do you anticipate that Trump and his administration is going to try to interfere with the overseas ballots?
They've signaled that, and Trump has said that he wants everyone to vote in person on one day and to do away with any absentee balloting. And so it isn't just overseas individuals that would be would be
disenfranchised, I think is the word you're looking for. Yeah.
And but for instance, a student that's going to school from in California that's from Chicago would have to return home to vote on election day in order for him or her to vote. Same thing with a person that's in a nursing home; they wouldn't be able to vote ahead of time, and many people are on vacation or traveling on business, and it's just not possible for everyone to be in their home voting precinct to vote on election day. We figured that it would cost us about $4,000 for us to fly home to. We're registered in Iowa, and to fly home to Iowa for the primary and for the general election, it would be about $4,000. And that's a pretty expensive fee for anybody to pay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you've got military families that are stationed all over the world, and military men and women, and it's just a tragedy. I would hope that the Supreme Court would rule that it was that attempt would be illegal. But with this Supreme Court, you never know. They've upheld a lot of the things that he wants to do, and actually in the Constitution, elections are left up to the states. He has no say in that. But Congress and the state legislators they're just so afraid of their shadow that I'm afraid that it could happen.
What news sources are you looking at in Ecuador to keep the pulse, to keep your finger on the pulse of the political situation here in the States?
Well, I can listen to NPR, and I can watch virtually any television station in the United States, Canada, Europe, and so we're constantly tuning in to Phoenix, where we lived, and Pittsburgh, where Rick is from, and Des Moines, New York stations. So we have the same news sources that your listeners would have in Chicago.
Anything with print? Do you get any newspapers virtually there?
I look at newspapers online.
And that's what I mean. The virtual newspapers.
No. A lot of the newspapers aren't as good as they used to be when we knew each other back in the 90s. But there's still some good newspapers out there, and so.
But it's mostly the electronic news that you're following now.
Yeah, absolutely. And because I'm living in a Spanish-speaking country, I pick up the newspaper here in Cuenca, and occasionally I will see news stories about politics in the United States, and it helps me where I might not understand the entire story. I understand enough that I'm able to follow along. But
Let me ask you about the things that people are saying to you in Ecuador about the American political stance on people moving to the States, primarily from Spanish-speaking countries. I mean, they have to be very aware in Ecuador of the president's latest threats to Venezuela, the president's deportation of people to these quote, close quote, terror prisons. What do people say to you, if anything, about that situation?
Well, I have a fish market that I go to, and I get Ecuadorian. It's similar to a cod, and also shrimp, and they're saying it's getting harder and harder because fishermen, legitimate fishermen, don't want to go out in their boats. They're just afraid that they're going to have a drone shoot them down, and so our supply is going to be affected because of what's going on with the Trump's Department of War.
So it's literally a dinner table issue for you now. This blowing up of fishing boats under the aegis of the drug war. Ha.
Right, and there were some Ecuadorians that were shot that were so it's not just Colombia and Venezuela, it's also Ecuador.
Really? I did not know. Yeah.
In fact, there was the two that were Ecuadorians. They were actually picked up, and they didn't arrest them or take them to the United States or anything. They just sent them back to Ecuador.
I did read about that. Yeah. I mean, which of course points out the whole big lie of the whole thing, which is if you really think that you have somebody shipping drugs, you interdict the boat, you pull the people off, you arrest them, there's a protocol. We've talked about it on the show before. You don't just blow their boat out of the water and kill them. And if you don't kill them, you don't just send them back and say, oh, never mind. It's cynical, and apparently it's going to get worse. I'm reminded of the door knocking I did before the last major election in Wisconsin, and how many people whose doors I knocked on who said, I just don't want him to get us. I want him to get us out of all these wars. We have no business being in any of these wars. And whether I agreed with him or not, I'm just wish that I could be a fly on the wall and see what these same people are saying about Donald Trump picking a war with Venezuela. I can't imagine that his supporters think this is really a good idea.
And it's not just Venezuela. I think that he's that Colombia is in his crosshairs, and Mexico. I think just a week or so ago, the DOD or one of the military, the Marines or the Army, I'm not sure, landed in. They thought that it was on U.S. property, U.S. grounds, but it was actually on Mexico.
Right. Right.
So,
they said, oh, yeah, we did an action in the United States. And then all of a sudden, whoops, no, you were not in the United States. You're in Mexico. It's really awful. I mean, our military has to be, the career professionals in particular, they've got to be mortified. The head of the Southern Command quit. We just had all of the Democrats who served in the CIA or the military, most notably Senator Kelly, who have essentially, quote, close quote, gotten into trouble, although that's good trouble, as the expression goes, for saying in public, don't do anything illegal, which is really hilarious because, of course, Donald Trump claims he's the law and order president. And now he wants to make trouble for people saying, hey, don't do anything that's against the Constitution. The whole thing is like being in some kind of strange Alice in Wonderland world, and just when you think it can't get stranger. But from your perspective in Ecuador, do you feel like you've just escaped? Do you feel sad for the country? Do you find it amusing in an awful sort of way? How do you sum up what it looks like from your redoubt in Ecuador to gaze upon the mess that's happening here?
Well, I am hopeful that at some point that either Trump will die or the Republicans, the Democrats will gain a majority in the House and the Senate in the next election, and that he might be impeached. But I am hopeful that, but it's very disturbing. And we moved last year. We kind of saw the writing on the wall in January of last year it looked like that I wasn't sure that Biden was going to make it, and I just did not want to live through another election cycle where Trump was my president for another 4 years, and so we got out of town before in April of last year.
Are you happy with your decision?
It's an excellent decision. The city that we live in is the safest city in South America, has been rated as the safest city in South America. It's high in the Andes, a city of about 600,000. Its health care has been rated the highest in not only South America, but North America. The health care rate's higher than the Rochester, Minnesota.
Wow.
Or Cleveland, Ohio.
Wow. For those who don't know, site of the Mayo Clinic and the Cleveland Clinic. Well, it sounds like other than the entertainment and grief of watching America go down in its own self, like just gnaw its leg off in its own trap here, you guys are pretty happy where you are. I want to thank you again, Mike Triggs, for writing the columns, keeping an eye on us from where you are. Wish you every kind of continued marital bliss in Ecuador. And thank you for your perspective on politics here in the States. It's always a joy to talk to you. If you would like to hear more from Mike, his book is called You Can't Make This Bleep Up. And if you're in the States where we have Amazon, you can get it that way. He's, as you can tell, a funny guy with a lot of insight and information to offer. Thanks again for being with us on WCPT.
Okay, it's great talking to you too, Turi.
It's a minute before 4 o'clock. I'm Turi Ryder in for Edwin Eisendrath. It's been a joy to be with you, and we will be here tomorrow. I will be here tomorrow, and I hope you will be here tomorrow. Of course, we'll talk with David Levine, our favorite constitutional law expert professor, and we're also going to talk with somebody who retired as the superintendent of Gates of the Arctic National Park. That's the big park in Montana. And now, of course, he is on a rampage. He is advocating and watching everything that's going wrong with the park system under Trump. And you're going to hear from him also tomorrow at 2. Join me then. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Edwin Eisendrath. Thanks to you most of all on the Heartland Signal website and WCPT, where facts matter.